We now begin Chapter 2 of the lecture, which focuses on the qualitative research design. Unlike quantitative research, which emphasizes measurement and numerical analysis, we now move to qualitative research, which seeks to understand meaning, experiences, perspectives, and social realities from the viewpoint of participants. Qualitative research is especially valuable when researchers want to explore complex social phenomena that cannot easily be reduced to numbers. Governance issues often involve perceptions, beliefs, organizational culture, political dynamics, and lived experiences. These dimensions require deeper interpretation and contextual understanding. In Philippine public administration, qualitative research is commonly used in studies involving leadership, participatory governance, community organizing, and the like. For example, a researcher A researcher studying disaster response may conduct interviews with barangay officials and affected residents to understand how local communities experience government interventions. One distinguishing feature of qualitative research is its emphasis on depth rather than breadth. Instead of surveying hundreds of respondents, qualitative researchers often work with smaller groups but gather richer and more detailed data. The objective is not necessarily statistical generalization, but contextual understanding and interpretation. As DPA students, you must understand that qualitative research is not less scientific than quantitative research. It simply operates under different philosophical assumptions and research goals. Qualitative research provides valuable insights into governance realities that numbers alone may fail to capture. In many public administration studies, understanding human experiences is essential for effective policy and institutional reform. Now that we have introduced qualitative research as a methodological tradition, let us examine its defining characteristics and philosophical foundations more closely. Qualitative research seeks to understand how individuals interpret and make meaning of their experiences. Rather than measuring variables numerically, qualitative researchers explore stories, perspectives, interactions, and contexts. This approach recognizes that reality is socially constructed and that different individuals may experience the same phenomenon differently. One defining characteristic of quantitative research is the use of natural settings. Researchers study participants within their real-world environments instead of highly controlled conditions. For example, a researcher examining governance practices may observe municipal offices, attend community meetings, or conduct interviews within actual government settings. Another important feature is that the researcher serves as a primary research instrument. Unlike quantitative studies that rely heavily on standardized tools, qualitative researchers personally conduct interviews, observations, and interpretations. Because of these, reflexivity becomes important. Researchers must remain aware of how their perspectives and biases may influence the study. Qualitative research also emphasizes multiple data sources and inductive analysis. Researchers may combine interviews, observations, documents, field notes, and audiovisual materials to develop a holistic understanding of the phenomenon. Instead of starting with fixed hypotheses, themes, and insights often emerge gradually from the data itself. Finally, qualitative research focuses on participants' meaning and lived experiences. In public administration, this approach is especially valuable for understanding how policies are experienced on the ground. For example, while quantitative studies may measure citizen satisfaction scores, qualitative studies can explain why citizens feel satisfied or dissatisfied with government services. This depth of understanding makes quantitative or qualitative research highly relevant for governance analysis and policy improvement. Now that we understand the philosophical and methodological foundation of qualitative research, we can proceed to examine the qualitative research paradigm and the process through which inquiry develops. So, the qualitative research paradigm. The qualitative research paradigm emphasizes understanding rather than prediction. Unlike quantitative research, which seeks measurable relationships between variables, qualitative inquiry focuses on interpreting meanings, experiences, and social interactions. The qualitative paradigm recognizes that human realities are dynamic, contextual, and shaped by culture and social experience. The first stage show in this slide is observation. Qualitative researchers immerse themselves in natural settings to gather rich and detailed data. Observation allows researchers to understand behavior, interactions, and context beyond what participants explicitly say. In governance studies, observation may involve attending public consultations, community assemblies, or even government meetings. The second stage is documentation. Qualitative researchers systematically record field notes, interviews, transcripts, organizational documents, and other forms of evidence. Documentation is essential because qualitative analysis relies heavily on detailed descriptions and careful interpretation of textual data. The third and fourth stages involve analysis and interpretation. Researchers identify recurring patterns, themes, and meanings within the data. Unlike qualitative analysis, which focuses on numerical relationships, qualitative analysis seeks to understand the significance and even the implications of participants' experiences. Interpretation connects individual experiences with broader social and even institutional contexts. The final stage is refinement. Qualitative inquiry is often iterative, meaning researchers repeatedly return to the data to deepen understanding and even to refine it. So, this flexibility is one of the reasons why qualitative research is considered emergent research. As DPA students, you must appreciate that qualitative research is not linear but evolving, responsive, and interpretive. Having explored the qualitative research paradigm, let us now discuss the situations in which qualitative methods are most appropriate. One of the most important decisions researchers make is determining when qualitative methods are appropriate. Qualitative research is especially useful when researchers seek depth, context, and understanding rather than measurement alone. It is often used when little is known about a phenomenon, or when existing quantitative data cannot fully explain complex realities. The first situation where qualitative methods are appropriate is when exploring new or under-researched phenomena. For example, a DPA student may study the experiences of local government implementing artificial intelligence systems in public service delivery. Since the topic is relatively new, qualitative inquiry can help identify emerging issues, perceptions, and challenges. Qualitative methods are also valuable when understanding context is essential. Governance issues are deeply shaped by social, political, cultural, or even organizational environments. For instance, studying indigenous participation in local governance requires understanding cultural practices, historical experiences, and community relationships that quantitative surveys alone may not capture. Another important use of qualitative research is capturing complexity and giving voice to participants. In many governance studies, frontline workers, marginalized communities, or local officials possess experiences that are difficult to reduce numerically. Qualitative interviews and interventions allows this perspective to emerge in a very authentic way. Finally, qualitative methods are often used to explain quantitative findings. For example, survey data may show low citizen trust in government agencies. But qualitative interviews can explain why people feel distrustful, and this demonstrates how qualitative research contributes not only to exploration but also to deeper interpretation of governance realities. Now that we understand when qualitative methods are appropriate, let us examine the major qualitative methodologies that are available. So, qualitative research is not a single approach, but a collection of methodological traditions. Each methodology has its own philosophical foundations, research purposes, and analytical procedures. Therefore, selecting a qualitative methodology requires careful alignment between the research questions and the methodological approach. The first methodology introduced in this slide is phenomenology. Phenomenology focuses on understanding lived experiences and the meanings individuals attach to those experiences. Researchers attempt to identify the essence of a phenomenon from the perspectives of participants. The second methodology is case study research, which examines a bounded system such as an organization, community, program, or event in depth. In public administration, case studies are commonly used to analyze governance reforms, policy implementation, or institutional innovations within specific agencies or local governments. The third and fourth methodologies are ethnography and grounded theory. Ethnography studies culture and social practices through immersion and participant observation, while grounded theory seeks to develop theory inductively from data. Both these approaches, ethnography and grounded theory, seeks to develop theory inductively, and they emphasize deep engagements with participants and social contexts. Of course, I haven't discussed narrative research, which focuses on personal stories and experiences over time. Narrative inquiry is valuable in public administration because it reveals how individuals construct meaning around governance experiences. leadership journeys, or public service careers. Understanding this methodology allows researchers to select approaches that best address the research objectives. Among these methodologies, phenomenology is one of the most widely used approaches for examining lived experiences. Let's explore this methodology in detail. Phenomenology is a qualitative methodology that seeks to understand the lived experiences of individuals regarding a particular phenomenon. The goal is not simply to describe events, but to uncover the essence of the experience and how participants interpret its meaning. Phenomenological research is grounded in the belief that human experiences contain deeper meanings that can only be understood through careful reflection and interpretation. Researchers conduct in-depth interviews and encourage participants to describe their experiences as fully and even as concretely as possible. In public administration, phenomenology is useful for studying experiences related to governance, leadership, bureaucracy, or public service delivery. For example, a researcher may explore the lived experiences of frontline health workers during the COVID-19 pandemic or the experiences of local officials implementing disaster response programs. One important aspect of phenomenology is the emphasis on shared experiences. Researchers look for common themes and meanings across participants. Although individuals may describe experiences differently, phenomenological analysis seeks to identify the core essence that connects these experiences together. For DPA students, phenomenology is particularly valuable when studying human-centered governance issues. Policies and institutions affect real people with real experiences. Understanding these lived realities allows researchers to generate insights that are not only academically meaningful, but also socially and administratively relevant. To better appreciate the phenomenological research, let's examine its major concepts and defining features. Phenomenology is guided by several important concepts that shape how researchers collect and even interpret data. These concepts distinguish phenomenology from other qualitative methodologies and provide the philosophical foundation for understanding lived experience. The first concept is bracketing, also known as epoche. Bracketing refers to the effort of researchers to set aside their personal assumptions, biases, and prior knowledge while examining participants' experiences. Although complete objectivity may not be possible, phenomenological researchers strive to approach the phenomena with openness and, better yet, with reflexivity. The second concept is the essence of the experience. Phenomenological researchers seek to identify the essential meanings and structures that define a phenomenon across participants. For example, in studying public servants during crises, researchers may identify recurring themes such as uncertainty, resilience, sacrifice, or even institutional pressure. Another important point is intentionality, which recognizes that consciousness is always directed towards something. Human experiences are always experiences of particular events, relationships, or even realities. This principle helps researchers focus on how participants perceive and interpret the phenomenon under study. Finally, phenomenology values rich and detailed descriptions. Researchers aim to produce vivid accounts that allow readers to understand the depth and meaning of participants' experiences. In public administration, such descriptions provide valuable insights into how policies, institutions, and governance practices are experienced by citizens and public servants themselves. Having discussed the philosophical foundations and key features of phenomenology, we can now proceed to the actual process of phenomenological analysis and how researchers transform lived experiences into meaningful themes and practices. Phenomenological analysis process. Phenomenological research follows a systematic process that transforms individual experiences into meaningful themes and descriptions. Although qualitative research is flexible and interpretive, phenomenology still requires methodological rigor to the essence of a lived experience. The first stage is data collection through in-depth interview. Researchers select participants who have directly experienced the phenomenon under study. In phenomenology, participants are chosen not because they statistically represent a population, but because they possess meaningful experiences relevant to the research question. After collecting interviews, researchers repeatedly read and reflect on the transcripts. This immersion allows the researchers to become deeply familiar with the data. And during this stage, researchers attempt to understand not only what participants experienced, but also how they interpreted those experiences. The next stage involves identifying meaning units and clustering them into themes. Researchers examine significant statements, recurring ideas, emotions, and patterns across participants. For example, a phenomenological study of frontline government workers during crisis may identify themes such as emotional exhaustion, resilience, bureaucratic pressure, or public accountability. Finally, researchers develop a composite description that captures the essence of the phenomenon. The goal is to present a rich and coherent understanding of the shared experience. In public administration, phenomenological findings often provide valuable insights in how policies, institutions, and governance practices affect individuals on a human level. While phenomenology focuses on lived experience, another major qualitative methodology emphasizes the in-depth examination of specific systems, organizations, or profiles. This methodology is also known as case study research. Case study research involves an in-depth examination of a bounded system covered as a case. And community. The primary objective is to develop a holistic understanding of the case within its real-world context. Case study is widely used in public administration because governance issues are often context-specific. Policies may succeed in one locality but fail in another due to differences in leadership, institutional capacity, political dynamics, or community participation. Case studies allow researchers to explore these contextual complexities in detail. So we also need to introduce three types of case studies, and you see them in bullet points here in this presentation. Here, I enlarge it for you. Intrinsic, instrumental, and collective. Intrinsic case studies focus on understanding unique or interesting case. Say, instrumental case studies use the case to gain broader insight into theoretical studies. Some book investigate other patterns or phenomena. For example, a researcher may compare several local government units implementing digital governance reforms to identify common challenges and best practices. Collective case studies are especially valuable for comparative governance analyses. As DPA students, you will likely encounter case study research frequently because it is highly compatible with policy analysis, organizational assessment, and even institutional evaluation. Case studies allows researchers to generate research insights that can inform administrative reforms, governance innovation, and public sector decision making. To conduct a rigorous case study, researchers must gather evidence from multiple sources. Let us now examine major data sources commonly used in case study research because we can still learn from how they are done and how we can actually move forward from them. So what are the data sources for case study research? One of the defining strengths of case study research is its use of multiple data sources. Rather than relying on a single form of evidence, case study researchers combine different types of data to develop a comprehensive understanding of the case. The first major source is interviews. Researchers conduct in-depth conversations with participants, stakeholders, or key informants to understand perspectives, experiences, and interpretations. In governance studies, interview participants may include public officials, community leaders, civil society representatives, or citizens. The second source is observation. Through direct observation, researchers examine behaviors that are very important in the long run. Behaviors, interactions, routines are very important, no? So for an organizational practice, for example, that happens within the natural setting, a researcher studying public service delivery may observe transactions within government offices to understand how policy operate in practice in detail, no? So, sorry, I'm just getting something here. So, the third source is documents or even archival records. Case study researchers analyze reports, policy argument documents, meeting minutes, memoranda, performance evaluations, and other official records. These materials provide institutional and historical context that supports deeper analysis. Additional sources may include audiovisual materials, Physical artifacts, photographs, videos, maps, or organizational tools that may reveal important dimensions of governance practices, and even institutional culture. By combining multiple forms of evidences at this level, researchers strengthen the credibility and richness of their case study findings. Because case study research uses multiple sources of evidence, researchers must endure methodological rigor and credibility. Let us now discuss the rigorous case studies and how they are conducted. A common criticism of qualitative research is that it may become overly subjective or anecdotal if not conducted rigorously. Case study research addresses this concern by applying systematic procedures that enhance credibility, trustworthiness, and even analytical depth. One important principle is establishing clear boundaries in the research process. Researchers must clearly define what is the case, what period it covers, and what aspects are included in the study. These are all very important aspects to consider. And therefore, things that we cannot ignore when we are conducting these types of research. So if you're doing this type of research, that means you have to take into consideration this possible direction or this possible line of thinking as you move forward. Okay? So moving on. So as we've said, we need to take into consideration establishing clear boundaries because we need to define what the case is about and the like. Another important strategy is triangulation. This is something you are all required to do, even if you're doing another type of research. Triangulation is not an option, no? It is a necessity. This is the only way the study will be able to stand any scrutiny, especially if you're using a qualitative methodology. So triangulation refers to the multiple use of the use of multiple data sources, methods, and perspectives to confirm findings. For example, a researcher studying local governance reforms may combine interviews, observations, and official documents to validate conclusions. Researchers must also maintain a systematic database of evidence and preserve a clear chain of evidence. This means organizing field notes, interview transcripts, documents, and analytical memos carefully so that interpretations can be traced back to the original data. Such procedures strengthen transparency and even accountability in qualitative research. Finally, rigorous case study research involves considering rival explanations and even conducting member checking. Researchers examine alternative interpretations and may return findings to participants for validation. In public ad, these practices are especially important because governance research often influences policies, organizational reforms, and even public decision making. So having discussed case study research, we now move to another important qualitative methodology that focuses on culture, um, shared practices, or even social interaction, ethnography. Ethnography is a qualitative research methodology rooted in anthropology that focuses on studying culture and social life. Ethnographers immerse themselves in the daily lives of participants in order to understand shared beliefs, practices, values, and meanings from an insider's perspective. Unlike short-term interviews or surveys, ethnography often involves prolonged fieldwork. Researchers spend extended periods observing, participating, and even interacting with the setting being studied. This immersion allows researchers to understand cultural patterns and even social dynamics in depth. In public administration, ethnography can be used to study organizational culture, bureaucratic practices, community governance, or citizen government interaction. For example, a researcher may conduct an ethnographic study of informal practices within a local government office or examine community participation in barangay decision making. One of the strengths of ethnography is its ability to reveal hidden norms and unspoken practices uh, that may not emerge through surveys or formal interviews. Public institutions often have informal routines, power dynamics, and organizational cultures that strongly influence governance outcomes. However, ethnography also requires patience, reflexivity, and ethical sensitivity. Researchers must build trust with participants while maintaining analytical distance. As DPA students, understanding ethnography is important because governance is not only about formal policies but also about the clusters and practices that shape institutional behavior. To better understand ethnographic research, we must now examine its major concepts and analytical perspectives. Ethnography is guided by several important concepts that shape how researchers interpret culture and social interaction. These concepts provide the theoretical lens through which ethnographers examine human behavior with specific communities or organizations. The first concept is culture. In ethnography, culture refers to the shared beliefs, values, practices, symbols, or behaviors that characterize a group. Culture influences how people think, interact, and make decisions. In governance research, organizational culture can strongly affect public service delivery and institutional performance. Another important concept is the emic perspective, or the insider's point of view. Ethnographers attempt to understand reality from the perspective of participants themselves. For example, a researcher studying barangay governance may seek to understand how local officials and residents interpret participation, authority, and accountability. The opposite perspective is the ethic perspective, which represents the researcher's analytical interpretation. Ethnographers balance insider understanding with scholarly analysis. And this balance is important because researchers must interpret cultural practices critically while still respecting participants' viewpoints. Finally, ethnography emphasizes thick description. Thick description involves rich, detailed accounts that explain not only behavior but also the context and meaning behind it. In public administration, the thick description allows researchers to capture the complexity of governance realities and institutional life beyond surface level observations. Now that we understand the conceptual foundation, let's examine the actual process through which ethnography research is conducted. Ethnographic methods and process. Ethnographic research follows a process that emphasizes immersion, observation, participation, and continuous analysis. Unlike highly structured quantitative designs, ethnography develops gradually as researchers interact with participants and learn about the social environment. The first stage is entry and rapport. Researchers gain access to the setting and establish trust with participants. In governance research, this may involve securing permission from local officials, government agencies, or community leaders before beginning fieldwork. The second stage is immersion. Researchers spend extended time within the setting, participating in daily activities while observing social interactions and routines. For example, an ethnographer studying local governance may attend meetings, observe transactions, or participate in community events. The third and fourth involve documentation and analysis. Researchers collect field notes, interviews, documents, and artifacts while simultaneously identifying patterns and themes. Ethnographic analysis is continuous and iterative, meaning interpretation evolves throughout the research process. The final stage is representation. Ethnographers produce written accounts that bring the culture and social setting to life for readers. These narratives aim to provide a deep understanding of how governance practices, organizational norms, or community interaction operate within real-world contexts. While traditional ethnography often emphasizes objectives, cultural description, contemporary ethnography, on the other hand, has evolved into several forms that reflect different philosophical and even analytical orientations. Let's look at them. So, types of ethnography. Ethnography has developed into several forms, each with different purposes, assumptions, and even calculations. Select the most appropriate ethnographic approach for the research questions and even philosophical perspectives. The first type is realist ethnography, which represents the traditional ethnographic approach. Realist ethnographers attempt to present objective descriptions of the culture while minimizing the researcher's personal voice. The emphasis is on portraying social reality systematically and accurately. The second type is critical ethnography. Critical ethnographers focus on issues of power, inequality, oppression, and social justice. In public administration, critical ethnography may examine how bureaucratic systems marginalize certain communities and how institutional practices reinforce inequality. The third type is autoethnography, where researchers examine their own experiences as part of the cultural phenomenon being studied. This approach combines personal narrative with cultural analysis. For example, a public servant pursuing doctoral studies may reflect on their own bureaucratic experiences to analyze broader governance realities. As DPA students, understanding these ethnographic approaches is valuable because governance is deeply connected to culture, identity, and institutional practice. Ethnographic methods allow researchers to move beyond formal structures and even examine the lived experiences or realities of administration, leadership, and public service within specific social contexts. So, having discussed ethnography and its different forms, we now move to another influential qualitative research methodology, grounded theory. So, let's move to grounded theory. So grounded theory is a qualitative methodology that focuses on generating theory directly from data. Unlike approaches that begin with pre-existing theories or even hypotheses, grounded theory allows concepts, patterns, and even theoretical explanations to emerge inductively through systematic analysis. The primary goal of grounded theory is not merely to describe experiences, but to explain social processes and interactions. Researchers examine how people respond to situations, how decisions are made, and how patterns develop within social or organizational settings. In public administration, grounded theory is useful for understanding administrative behavior, policy implementation processes, or even organizational change. The slide that you have here in front of you presents grounded theory as an iterative process involving open coding, eggshell coding, and selective coding. Researchers continuously move between data collection and analysis. This flexibility allows theories to develop gradually as researchers gain deeper understanding of the phenomena. For example, a DPA student studying corruption reporting mechanisms in local government units may initially gather interviews about employee experiences. Through continuous analysis, patterns may emerge regarding fear of retaliation, institutional trust, leadership support, or even organizational culture. These themes can eventually contribute to a theoretical explanation of whistleblowing behavior in government institution. Grounded theory is especially valuable in governance research because many administrative processes are dynamic and context dependent. Rather than forcing data into existing theoretical categories, researchers allow governance realities themselves to shape emerging theory. And this makes grounded theory highly relevant for developing context-sensitive explanations within Philippine public administration. To understand how grounded theory develops explanation systematically, let us now examine the coding process that forms the foundation of grounded theory analysis. Coding is the central analytic process in grounded theory research. Through coding, researchers break down data into smaller parts, identify patterns, and gradually develop conceptual categories that explain the phenomenon being studied. The first stage is open coding. During this phase, researchers examine the data line by line and identify significant concepts, actions, or events. Labeling are assigned to meaningful segments of data. So for example, in a study on public sector employee burnout, codes may include work overload, lack of recognition, or even political pressure. The second stage is actual coding. Here, researchers examine relationships between categories and organize them into broader conceptual structures. Researchers identify conditions, interactions, causes, and consequences associated with the emerging themes. So the final stage is selective coding. Researchers identify a core category that integrates the different themes into a coherent theoretical explanation. The emerging theory should explain how and why the phenomenon occurs. For instance, a grounded theory study may conclude that organizational trust serves as the central factor influencing employee engagement in government agencies. As DPA students, you must understand that coding is not simply labeling data mechanically. Coding requires interpretation, reflection, and theoretical sensitivity. Researchers continuously compare data, refine categories, and build explanations grounded in participants' experiences and organizational realities. Beyond coding, grounded theory also relies on strategic sampling and the concept of saturation. Let's examine these important principles in detail. Grounded theory differs from many other methodologies because data collection is guided by the emerging theory itself. This process is known as theoretical sampling. So instead of selecting all participants at the beginning of the study, researchers decide who can interview next based on what they are learning from the data. Theoretical sampling allows researchers to deepen and to refine emerging categories. For example, if initial findings suggest that leadership style strongly influences employee motivation in government offices, researchers may intentionally seek participants from agencies with different leadership environments to compare experiences. This iterative process continues as researchers move back and forth between data collection and analysis. Researchers seek participants, settings, situations that can confirm, challenge, or even expand developing theory. The process is flexible rather than responsive. So that's how different the two are. Okay? Uh, so the process is flexible and responsive. Another important concept at this point is theoretical saturation. Saturation occurs when new data no longer provides significant new insights or categories. At this point, researchers conclude that the emerging theory is sufficiently developed and grounded in the data. In public administration research, theoretical saturation is important because governance realities are often complex and multifaceted. Researchers must collect enough perspectives to capture institutional diversity, organizational culture, and administrative variation. Saturation ensures that the resulting theory reflects the depth and complexity of governance experiences. And after discussing grounded theory, we now move to another qualitative methodology that focuses on narratives, life experiences, personal meaning, narrative research. As individuals, so narrative research examines how individuals construct meaning through stories and personal accounts. This methodology focuses on the experiences of individuals over time and explores how people interpret significant events, challenges, and transitions in their lives. Narrative inquiry is based on the idea that people naturally organize experiences into stories. Through storytelling, individuals explain their identities, values, struggles, and achievements. Narrative research, therefore, seeks to understand not only what happened, but also how participants make sense of what happened. In public ad, narrative research is useful for studying leadership journeys, public service experiences, policy implementation stories, or even organizational transformation. For example, a researcher may explore the career narratives of women leaders in local government or the experiences of frontline workers during national crises. Narrative research often involves extensive interviews, journals, autobiographies, oral histories, and even personal documents. Researchers analyze these stories to identify themes, turning points, and patterns of meaning. Unlike grounded theory, which aims to develop theoretical explanation, narrative inquiry emphasizes personal experience and meaning making. As DPA students, you should recognize the value of narratives in governance research. Policies and institutions are experienced by real people whose stories reveal the human dimension of administration, leadership, public service. Narrative research allows researchers to connect governance structures with individual lived realities. Narrative research can take several forms depending on the focus of the inquiry. So let's examine the major types of narrative research. No, there are four. The narrative research includes different forms of analysis depending on the scope and nature of the stories being examined. These approaches help researchers organize and even interpret life experiences systematically. The first type is biographical study, which examines life activities, produced documents, and even historical records. In a biographical study may focus on the life and leadership experiences of a public official, a reform advocate, or government administrator. The second type is autobiographical study. Here, researchers analyzes written accounts where individuals tell their own stories through memoirs, diaries, or journals. Such materials can provide rich insights into institutional life, bureaucratic experiences, or even leadership challenges. Another form is life history research, which situates individual experiences within broader historical and even social contexts. For example, researchers may examine how political transitions, decentralization, reforms, or administrative changes shape the career paths of public servants across generations. The slide that you have in front of you also introduces oral history, which collects personal experiences and reflections and recollections regarding events and their effect. Oral histories are valuable in governance research because they preserve institutional memory and provides firsthand accounts of policy implementation, policy transitions, and public administration reforms in the country. Now that we understand the different forms of narrative research, let us now examine how narratives themselves are structured and even analyzed. Narrative structure and analysis. Narrative research narrative researchers analyze not only the content of stories, but also how stories are organized and structured. Narrative structure provides insight into how individuals interpret events, assign meaning, and even construct personal identities. The first component of a narrative is the abstract, which briefly summarizes the story. The abstract provides an overview of the experience or event being described. In governance research, this may involve a participant summarizing a major administrative challenge or leadership experience. The next component is orientation, which establishes the context of the study. Orientation introduces the time, place, participants, and situation surrounding the experience. This stage is important because narratives are always embedded within social and even within institutional contexts. This slide also identifies complicating action, evaluation, resolution, and coda as major parts of narrative structure. Complicating action refers to the sequence of events. Evaluation explains why the events matter. Resolution describes the outcome. And coda connects the story back to the present. So understanding narrative structure helps researchers interpret how individuals frame governance experiences and construct meanings around administrative realities. For us, narratives often reveal how people perceive leadership, bureaucracy, accountability, and even institutional change over time. So after discussing narrative inquiry, we now move to another qualitative methodology. And this is the methodology that systematically examines communication materials, um, texts, or even documents. And it's called content analysis. So content analysis is a systematic method of examining text, documents, media, and communication materials in order to identify patterns, themes, and meanings. This methodology may be conducted qualitatively, quantitatively, or through combination of both approaches. In qualitative content analysis, for example, researchers focus on interpreting meanings, intentions, and themes within communication materials. These materials may include policy documents, government reports, speeches, news articles, social media discussions, or even organizational communications. Um, Content analysis is highly relevant for large amounts of textual and documentary data. Researchers may analyze presidential speeches, legislative records, local government ordinances, media coverage of public policies, or citizen feedback regarding government programs. One of the major strengths of content analysis is that it allows researchers to study communication systematically without directly interacting with the participants. This is especially useful when examining historical records, archival materials, or large-scale public discourse. As DPA students, you should recognize that content analysis is not simply reading documents casually. It requires systematic coding, categorization, and even interpretation. Whether analyzing policy narratives, administrative communication, or media framing, researchers must apply rigorous procedures to ensure credible and even meaningful findings. So, having introduced content analysis at this point, um, we can now proceed to examine the different approaches researchers use when conducting content analysis and how these approaches vary in various interpretations. So content analysis may be conducted using different approaches depending on the objective of the research process. The slide introduces three major approaches: conventional content analysis, directed content analysis, and summative content analysis. Each approach reflects a different strategy for examining textual or communication materials. The first approach is conventional content analysis, and in this method, categories and codes emerge directly from the data itself. Researchers do not begin with fixed theoretical assumptions, but instead allow patterns and meanings to develop inductively during analysis. This approach is especially useful when little prior research exists about the topic. The second approach is directed content analysis. Here, researchers begin with an existing theory or prior research framework that guides the coding process. And for example, a DPA student studying transparency in local governance may use established governance indicators as initial categories while remaining open to the new themes emerging from the data. The third approach is summative content analysis, and this method begins with counting words, phrases, or specific forms of content, and then extends towards deeper interpretation. For instance, researchers may analyze how often terms such as accountability, participation, or good governance appear in presidential speeches before interpreting the broader political meaning behind them. As doctoral students, you must recognize that content analysis is both systematic and interpretive. Whether you analyze policy documents, government reports, legislative records, media narratives, the methodological approach you choose should align with the research objectives, theoretical framework, and governance context. Having discussed content analysis methodologies, we can now conclude qualitative research this chapter by summarizing the most important lessons researchers must remember. At this point, we have explored several qualitative methodologies, including phenomenology, case study, research, ethnography, grounded theory, narrative inquiry, and even content analysis. And this slide summarizes the core principles researchers must remember when conducting them. I remember I have one semester of quantitative research, another semester of qualitative research, and then I think another semester for theological research, another semester for philosophical research, another semester for research statistics. So technically, if I will count all my research classes, I would have 10 research classes, all in my entire academic career or life. But going back, so the first takeaway, and yet I'm doing these in just 3 hours, all the research types. The first key takeaway is the importance of matching the methodology to the research purpose. Different qualitative approaches answer different types of questions. Phenomenology explores lived experience, ethnography examines culture, grounded theory develops theory, case studies provide contextual analysis, and selecting the appropriate methodology is essential for producing meaningful findings. The second principle is embracing emergence and flexibility. Unlike rigid quantitative designs, qualitative research evolves as researchers gather deeper insights from participants and contexts. Researchers must remain open to unexpected findings, changing directions, and even emerging interpretations. Another important lesson is the importance of rigor and reflexivity. Qualitative research must still demonstrate trustworthiness through strategies such as triangulation, prolonged engagement, member checking, and thick description. Researchers must also remain reflexive about their own perspectives, assumptions, and influence on the study. Finally, qualitative research emphasizes context and meaning. Governance realities cannot always be separated from social, cultural, historical, and even institutional environments. In public administration, understanding context is essential because policy and institutions operate differently across communities, agencies, and governance settings. So having completed our discussion of qualitative research, we can already move very quickly to the third chapter, which is mixed methods research. We now enter chapter 3 of the lecture, which focuses on mixed methods research design. Mixed methods research intentionally combines quantitative and qualitative approaches within a single study in order to provide a more comprehensive understanding of a research problem. Mixed methods research emerged because many social and governance issues are too complex to be fully understood using only numbers or only narratives. Quantitative research provides measurement and generalizability, while qualitative research provides depth and contextual understanding. Mixed methods seeks to integrate these strengths. In public ad, mixed methods research is highly valuable because governance problems are multidimensional. For example, a researcher studying disaster preparedness may use surveys to measure preparedness levels while also conducting interviews to understand local perceptions, institutional challenges, or community experiences. Mixed method is not simply the use of multiple techniques. What distinguishes mixed method is intentional integration. Researchers deliberately connect qualitative and quantitative findings in order to develop richer and more complex narratives or interpretation. To better understand the mixed method research, let's examine its core characteristic and even philosophical foundation. Let me enlarge this one. Mixed method research is often described as the third methodological movement because it integrates the strengths of both quantitative and qualitative traditions. Rather than viewing these approaches as competing paradigms, mixed method researchers recognize that both can contribute valuable form of knowledge. One major feature of mixed methods research is integration. Quantitative and qualitative data are connected, merged, or even embedded within different stages of the study. Researchers intentionally combine findings to produce broader and deeper insights. Mixed method research is commonly associated with pragmatism as its philosophical foundation. And pragmatism emphasizes what works in addressing research problems. Instead of focusing on rigid methodological boundaries, pragmatic researchers choose methods based on their usefulness in answering the research question. Another important aspect here is mixed method research is meta-inference. Meta-inference refers to conclusions drawn from integrating both quantitative and qualitative findings. The goal is not merely to present two separate data sets, but to create a unified understanding of the governance issue being studied. Now that we understand the foundations of mixed research, methods research, let's examine the major rationale researchers use for combining quali and quantitative approaches. So, this is a characteristic of the mixed method. And there are four. Mixed method research possesses several defining characteristics that distinguish it from simply using multiple methods independently. The first characteristic is integration itself. Researchers may merge data sets, connect one phase to another, or embed one method within another. Integration allows quantitative and qualitative findings to complement each other and provide a more complete understanding of the phenomenon. Another characteristic is purpose-driven methodology. Researchers combine methodology for specific reasons, such as triangulation, complexity, development, or expansion. Mixed methods should never be used simply because it appears more sophisticated. The choice must always be justified by the research problem. The slide also highlights pragmatism as a philosophical foundation because pragmatic researchers prioritize solving problems rather than defending methodological purity. And finally, mixed methods research emphasizes meta-inferences where conclusions are developed through the integration of findings from both approaches. And having discussed these characteristics, we can now examine specific reasons or rationale why we should do mixed method. So researchers use mixed method for several important reasons. There are 5: triangulation, complementarity, development, initiation, and expansion. The first rationale is triangulation. Triangulation involves using different methods to confirm or validate findings. The second rationale is complementarity. Qualitative findings may help explain quantitative results, while quantitative findings may strengthen qualitative interpretations. The third rationale is development, where findings from one method inform another method. Researchers may use qualitative interviews to develop survey instruments or use quantitative results to identify participants to follow up interviews. The final rationale are initiation and expansion. Initiation occurs when conflicting findings generate new questions or perspectives, while expansion extends the scope of inquiry by examining different dimensions of a phenomenon. Now that we understand why researchers combine the methods, let's examine the key design consideration in planning mixed method. Designing a mixed method study requires careful planning because researchers must coordinate quantitative and qualitative components systematically. There are 3 major considerations: timing, priority, and integration. The first consideration is timing. Researchers must determine whether the quantitative or qualitative phases will occur sequentially or concurrently. Sequential designs involves one phase followed by another, while concurrent designs collect both forms of data at the same time. The second consideration is priority or weighting. Weight. Some mixed method studies give equal emphasis on quanti and quali, while others prioritize one method over the other. Third is integration. Researchers must decide how findings will be combined. Integration may involve merging data sets, connecting phrases, or embedding one method within the other. Effective integration is essential because it distinguishes true mixed methods from merely conducting separate studies. Among the different mixed method designs, one of the most widely used is the convergent parallel design, this one. The convergent parallel design is one of the most common mixed methods approaches. In this design, quantitative and qualitative data are collected simultaneously, which means at the same time, during the same phase. Researchers analyze the 2 data sets before integrating the findings during interpretation. The purpose is to compare, validate, and complement results from both approaches. This design is especially useful when researchers want equal emphasis on quantitative and qualitative evidence. The strength of the convergent design lies in its ability to provide comprehensive understanding within a relatively shorter time frame because both forms of data sets are collected concurrently. However, researchers must carefully manage the complexity of analyzing or even integrating 2 different data sets. To better appreciate the convergent design, let's examine a concrete example of this one. So the slide presents an example of a convergent mixed method study examining factors influencing student engagement in online learning. Although the example comes from education, the same logic can be applied to public administrative research. In the quantitative component, researchers administer surveys and analyze numerical data to identify patterns and predictors. Quantitative analysis provides measurable evidence regarding relationships between variables and the extent of particular outcomes. In the qualitative component, researchers conduct interviews or focus groups to explore participants' experiences and perspectives in depth. Qualitative analysis helps explain why certain patterns appear in the quantitative findings. The key lesson from these example is that mixed method research design allows researchers to answer both what and why questions simultaneously. This is especially valuable in governance research where numerical indicators alone may not fully explain public attitudes, institutional behaviors, or policy outcomes. Another important mixed method approach is the sequential explanatory sequential design, where qualitative research is used to explain quantitative findings. The exploratory sequential design begins with quantitative data collection and analysis, followed by a qualitative phase design. This design is particularly useful when quantitative findings raise questions that quite require deeper interpretation. Researchers first identify patterns, relationships, or unexpected outcomes statistically and then use qualitative inquiry to understand the reasons behind them. So, one strength of this design is its clarity and structure. The two phases are clearly separated, making the research process easier to organize and explain. However, the design may require longer time frames because the second phase depends on results from the first phase. While exploratory sequential design begins with the quanti inquiry, another mixed method begins with the qualitative exploration before moving to quantitative analysis. And this is called the exploratory sequential design. So the other one is explanatory. This is exploratory. The exploratory sequential design reverses the order of explanatory sequential design because it will begin with qualitative data collection and analysis, followed by quantitative research that builds upon the qualitative findings. This is useful, especially if you're studying new phenomena, developing instruments, or identifying variables that are not yet fully understood. Qualitative inquiry helps researchers explore concepts before measuring them quantitatively. So as we conclude our discussion on mixed method research, let's now summarize the key principles researchers must remember in conducting rigorous mixed method research. Sorry, there's a slide that got lost, but let me go to the last slide, which is this one. Conducting rigorous mixed method research requires more than simply combining surveys and interviews. Researchers must clarify, justify why mixed methods is necessary and explain how integration contributes to answering the research problem. The first principle is justifying the mixing of methods because researchers must explain what additional insights are gained by combining quantitative and qualitative approaches. The use of mixed methods should always be purposeful and grounded in the objectives of the study. The second principle is planning integration carefully. Researchers must determine where integration will occur during research design, data collection, analysis, or interpretation. Effective integration strengthens the coherence and depth of the study. Another important principle is addressing methodological and philosophical tensions. Quantitative and qualitative approaches are based on different assumptions about knowledge and reality, and researchers must acknowledge these differences and explain how the approaches complement each other within the study. Finally, rigorous mixed method research requires strong methodological competence, reflexivity, and clarity. Mixed method can produce highly valuable insights, especially in public administration, because governance issues are complex, multidimensional, and deeply contextual. By integrating measurement with meaning, researchers can both generate academically rigorous and practically useful for policy and institutional reform. I know I've been talking for too long, so let me end this one. This concludes our discussion of quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method research design. As scholars of public administration, Your challenge is not simply to choose methods mechanically, sorry, ang taas pala, but also to design research that is rigorous, ethical, context sensitive, and responsive to the realities of governance and public service in the Philippines. Thank you very much for listening and see you in the next meeting.